Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant project. If you're wondering why I'm in my car, it's just I'm using it as a portable sound booth. I used to do this a lot more early on in my career. I think during COVID. Let's not mention the COVID years, but the COVID years, because here, at least in Sydney, there was a time when I think pretty much literally couldn't go outdoors. But I really don't like being trapped indoors all the time, and so the one place I could go was my car, and it's got a bit of natural soundproofing. And for those of you who don't know, here around me we have a lot of wild birds, including cockatoos. If you don't know what cockatoos sound like, just do a YouTube search. You will find out, and then you will instantly understand why I'm in my car, because there's quite a large colony or population of cockatoos around here. Anyway, what I want to talk to you about this week is pageant paperwork. Now, that might sound a bit more boring, or certainly a bit less glamorous than on stage with your gown, less sassy than your bikini walk, or even less of a chance to perhaps make an impact than your interview. That being said, over the last couple of weeks, probably the last 2 to 4 weeks with my private clients, it's interesting watching the phases or the trends. Over the last few weeks, I've been getting a lot of requests from my clients to, can you please have a look at my paperwork, and do you have any suggestions? And it's kind of a bit difficult to make any suggestions, because obviously the first port of call, well, not maybe obviously, but for myself, it's, are there any spelling or grammatical errors or typos or formatting errors? And I say that because I'm one of those people who is blessed/cursed with, I can look at a wall of text and go, hang on, that's a spelling mistake. It certainly came in handy when it came time to edit the books that I published. It's less handy perhaps when someone wants you to look at their paperwork and then you notice there's an extra space here, there's a space there, that's a spelling mistake there, there's a double line. Sometimes people say they want feedback, but then when you start giving them all the feedback, they might change their tune. But aside from that, because by and large, the paperwork that I was given had no errors per se. And I should mention, in this day and age, there's an increasing trend toward, some people call them sizzle reels, but using video to either supplement or completely replace the paperwork. And so what I mean, the best case that I can give is Miss USA last year, the first year under Tom, they did away with the paperwork. And I've mentioned this in previous week's videos. They did away with the paperwork entirely and replaced it with getting the contestants to shoot, I think it was a 2 to 3 minute video. And the video was pretty much supposed to be an insight into the lives of these state level Miss USA contestants, and to obviously guide the questions. Now, here's my point. I think a lot of people don't really know the purpose of paperwork. They want it to be right and they want it to be good, because somehow they think if it's good, it will help their chances of winning the pageant. But I don't think enough people have really given thought to what's the strategic purpose of either your paperwork or the video or the sizzle reel, if that's the way it's going. And for me, it's quite simple. The purpose of the paperwork, given that it's not actually scored unto itself, and if it is, please let me know, because I've never heard of any system where the paperwork itself is given a score. So given that it's not actually given a score, you might be wondering, well, how on earth can it impact my chances of winning? And there's a very good answer to that, and it's very important. And it's that if the only thing that a judge gets to see before you walk in that interview room is your paperwork or your video, because very often those videos would play, you walk in, the first thing that's flashed up is your video, then you turn to the judges and they start asking you questions. So even if they looked at the social media, the most important and most recent thing they've seen would be your paperwork or your video, or both, if that's the case. And so it is your best and pretty much your only chance to control the direction of your interview before you even get in the room. And here's what I mean by that a bit more explicitly. They're going to ask you questions, almost guaranteed, based on the contents of your paperwork or your video, aren't they? It's unlikely that they will ask you a complete tangential topic that is not listed anywhere in your paperwork. It's possible. It's not very likely. Also bear in mind that one of the skills you really need to work on, and you should have, is the ability to control the interview. So if it did go off the rails and it did go completely tangentially, you're actually able to guide it back to the things that you want to talk about. But your paperwork or your video is your best and only chance to control the direction of your interview, to control the questions that you get. And you should be controlling the questions not because you want easy questions. It's got nothing to do with easy or difficult questions. You want to control the interview so that they ask the questions that give you the chance to give the best answers. And what is the definition of best answers? I would argue that the best answer is the one that best positions you as their next title holder. So it's got nothing to do with easy or difficult, because you might want an easy question. I know a lot of girls who go, oh my God, thank God that was an easy question. I don't think that's a great attitude to have, especially when you think about it. If we do a math test at school and it's super easy, so pretty much everyone aces it and gets 100%. You might go, yeah, I got 100%. But if everyone got 100%, you haven't had any chance to distance yourself from the crowd to create any separation. So I've always thought that if you really were competitive and you really wanted to win, you'd want it to be, let's say, not as difficult as possible, but you'd want it to be difficult enough that, let's say, the pretenders, that's a horrible term, but I think you know what I mean, but the people who really weren't title holder material would be found out, because the last thing you want is for it to be crowded at the top. And so when it comes to your paperwork, to control the interview so that you get asked the best questions, and again, the best questions are the ones that enable you to give the answers that will position yourself as the logical title holder, like you'd be crazy to pick anyone else. Given all that, here are three filters or edicts that I want you to run your paperwork or the script of your video through. Good news is, anytime you have something like this, like 3 guidelines or 3 filters, it's a very natural and easy filter to put into a chat GPT or something like that. So whether you get your paperwork and say, hey, can you run my paperwork through these 3 filters, or the script of your sizzle reel or your video and say, hey, can you run my script through these 3 filters? And again, give it context. Say that you're competing for XYZ pageant and this is the paperwork and this is what the judges will read this is what the judges will read before I go in. And in all likelihood, the questions will be based on my paperwork or the contents of my video. So here are 3 things I want you to consider. And I apologize for the setup, but it's important you know the context. That's why I have these 3 filters. Number 1, everything in your paperwork you should be passionate and excited to talk about. So that's number 1. Everything in your video you must be passionate and excited to talk about. Now, that doesn't mean it has to all be super serious. But even if it's tell us a fun fact about yourself, put in something that you're at the very least excited about. Okay, maybe it doesn't position yourself as a best title holder, but a lot of the interview is about building rapport with your judges and having a good vibe, having good energy. And so if they ask you something and you've written down a fun fact, like let's say you say crocheting or doing crosswords, and you're really not passionate about that stuff at all, you just put it down because you couldn't think of anything. Or maybe you put it down by accident. I don't know. You don't want to be talking about something you're bored about, because then that vibe comes out in interview and it's going to affect the overall impression that you give. So number 1, everything in your paperwork or in your video, you should be super excited or super passionate or both to talk about. Number 2, in the same vein but the opposite direction, you should remove everything. You should absolutely remove everything that you're not excited to talk about. Because a lot of you have, and this is one of the critiques I had of most of my clients' paperworks, was that there was stuff in there that it was filler. And you have to understand, the paperwork is really not there in the same way that a CV is there before you go into a job interview, where the job of the CV really is to show, let's say, your past academic achievements, your past work experience, give a list of references, and it guides the questions to an extent, sure, but a job interview is it's not exactly the same as a pageant interview. Pageant interview, I would say, is more, yes, it's competency based, but you also have to show a bit more personality than maybe a typical job interview. So remove everything that you're not passionate or excited to talk about, because the last thing you want is for a judge in your interview to fixate on something that you really don't care about and doesn't position yourself as a title holder. Now, you could argue coherently that, well, Adrian, you just said that one of the skills you need is to control the interview, and I agree. But better that you don't have to exercise that skill every question, right? It would be nice if the conversation had some sort of very cohesive and organic flow. So remove everything there that you're not passionate and excited to talk about. And by the way, if you then come to me and say, well, there's not much left in my paperwork, first thing I would say is, look, it's not being marked. Remember we said that? And so I don't think you're going to lose marks because your paperwork is a bit shorter than other people's. But also, it is possible that if you remove the things you're not excited to talk about and there's not much there, that maybe that's a clue that you should be going and living more life before you enter another pageant. Right? If you don't have enough exciting things in your life, your career, your sphere of influence, if you don't have enough things to talk about to fill the space of a pageant bio or pageant sheet, or to fill the script of a 2-minute video, I would say you probably need to go and it's almost like to go get more of a personality, because I refuse to believe that there are not enough exciting or interesting things about you to fill out a pageant paperwork. But if that really honestly is the case, then I think you should go and live more life before considering entering a pageant. Now, understanding that, at a younger stage, you don't have as many things probably, but that being said, I know plenty of young pageant contestants who have a lot going on. But just bear that in mind, because some people get a bit of a fear when I say take out everything that you're not passionate about. They go, oh my God, there'll be nothing left. Either you're being a bit harsh on yourself, or it's a clue that, hey, maybe you're a bit too carbon copy of everyone else, and maybe you need to go and get a new hobby, extend yourself more in your career, or do something that's a bit out of the ordinary. So that's number 2. Remove everything that you're not excited to talk about. The third one is a natural follow-on, and it's the last one, which is, if there is stuff in your life, when you're thinking about this and you go, yeah, there's all this stuff that I'm interested in, put it on the paperwork. Now, I'm not saying everything goes in there. If you're super passionate about, I don't know, your cat, and it just makes no sense to put that on the pageant paperwork or to put it in your video, then don't put it in. But especially if in step 2 you removed a bunch of stuff and now your pageant paperwork or your script is looking a bit thin, well, think about what is the stuff that makes you excited, that gets you passionate, that gets you up early, keeps you up late. And if it's something that you think can make for an interesting interview question, put it in the paperwork. Because a lot of people, when you guys do anything to do with pageants, you go immediately into a pageant robot mode. And that also applies to your paperwork. You immediately start thinking, well, here's the stuff that I need to put. Here's the stuff that I absolutely shouldn't put. And you never take that step back to go, hang on, what's some interesting stuff about me that might help flesh this out that I hadn't really considered putting down? And by the way, if you have another coach and your coach says, or you have someone giving you feedback and they say, oh, you really shouldn't put this in there because it's not like pageant acceptable, I take all of that kind of advice in general with a huge grain of salt, because again, the purpose of the paperwork is to control the direction of your interview. If when you put something down, maybe it's not the typical thing that you would expect to put it down, but if you put it down and it helps control the direction of your interview, I would say, it'll be a conversation I have to have with you individually because there's such a thing as risk tolerance, but I would say, look, I want to control the interview, and as long as on that paperwork I'm not lying, then if this is a chance to control the interview, I'm going to do it. Now, to give you an example, so that I'm being a bit more concrete with this, I work with a client who is very high up in a company, a CEO, and there was a section at the very top of the paperwork that says awards and achievements. There wasn't a section really for career. And I said to her, awards and achievements, I'm thinking, well, I think the fact that you're a CEO, especially as a female of a large company, I think that's something that we should talk about. I think that's an achievement. She was thinking that it wasn't an achievement because she was thinking more of like awards you get as in there's a competition and you get an award. But I said to her, look, the point of the awards and achievements is to sort of say, hey, here are some of the highlights of my life. And I would certainly think that in anyone's career, especially as a woman working in let's say a male-dominated field, for you to rise to the position of any of the CXO, so CEO, CFO, COO, whatever it is, I would say that's something that some judges at least are going to be interested in and would ask you about. And you have to understand the subtext. When you say something like a CEO, there's a whole bunch of things or dominoes that subconsciously fall your way without you having to say anything. So if you put that you're CEO and the judge reads it, they're probably already thinking, okay, this girl, this woman, somewhat organized, somewhat responsible, at least can get along with people. It's probably a team player, probably pretty disciplined, probably pretty reliable, because you can't really rise to that sort of position in a big company without being those things. And so that's what I mean by if there's something that you're passionate or excited to talk about, or something that positions you well, and it's not in your paperwork, try to fit it in somewhere, obviously where it fits most logically. But don't be too black and white with, oh, it says awards and achievements and this is my career, so I can't put it in. Be a bit more flexible. Again, to me, as long as you're not lying, the purpose of your paperwork is not to be the documentation of everything you've done in your life. It's not. The purpose of this paperwork or your video, your sizzle reel, whatever it is to control the direction of the interview. And I think if you look at it in those terms, it will become pretty clear what at least some of the edits or additions or deletions that you should make. And so just once again, just to go through those 3 edicts or the 3 filters really quickly. Number 1, everything in there you should be excited to talk about. Number 2, remove everything you're not excited to talk about. Number 3, if there is something that you're excited to talk about and it's not in the paperwork, put it in there. Now, the videos have duration lengths, paperwork has maybe a word limit or a page limit, and so maybe you can't fit everything in there that you're passionate about. So you just prioritize. All right. I think that's a simple question. So have a look at the stuff that you want to put in there, order it in order. So what order? Well, the order of, again, the point is to control the interview. What question do you want to get asked most? Put that at the top. And then depending on how much length you have in your video, in the script, or what the word limit is or the page limit is, you might have to cut off maybe half of it, but make sure you get the top ones in there. So please look at your paperwork, all those introduction videos that play before you get interviewed through that lens. Because I will say last year when I looked at I was working with some of the Miss USA state title holders with mock interviews. And again, that was the first year where they were doing videos. And a lot of them had been, you could tell that it made them uncomfortable because they were preparing, they were anticipating, oh, it's going to be paperwork as usual. And then they had to make a video. And look, I think it's a great idea because I think a video, it's a lot harder to hide your personality. And I think video really shows your personality much more, especially if you script the hell out of it. It shows maybe that you're uncomfortable with being authentic in front of the camera, and that's something that I would like to know. But a lot of them sort of looked at it and went, I'm just going to give random fun facts and have really high production values. But they didn't give any thought to, hang on, this is my chance, my one chance to control the interview before it even starts. And I think a lot of them, if they had looked at it through that lens, would have shot a different video. By the time I got to work with him, it was only maybe 2 or 3 weeks out from Miss USA, and the deadline for putting in the video had passed, so we couldn't do that. But I think this year, this is one of the things I talked with Tom, Tom Brodeur, the CEO of Miss USA. It's one of the things that we talked about in the interview was what are the criteria for the open casting videos anyway, or the open call videos. And he was very specific that two of the big things was be authentic, and number two, production values were not going to be scored at all, which I thought was great. So look at your paperwork or your video through that lens, through that filter. It is your number one, and it's your first and best and pretty much your only chance to control that interview, to control the direction of your interview before you even walk in the room. Your social media might do that too, but you can't really guarantee that your judges would have looked at your social media, and even if they had a quick glance, that they really had a thorough look at it. So look at your paperwork or your video through that lens. Go through those 3 filters, edit it, play with it, and then if you want a good test, give the paperwork. I'd say give it to a person. Give it to ChatGPT or another AI if you're short of a person, and say, hey, if I gave you this paperwork, what are 3 questions that you would ask me? And if you do that with 10 different people, you'll begin to notice some patterns. And so then you can see, okay, my paperwork, it's effective because I'm getting asked the questions that I want. I mean, you don't even need to answer the questions if you don't want to. I mean, it'd be good practice. But if you give your paperwork to 10 different people and you're still getting asked questions that you don't really want to answer, that's your signal, isn't it? Go back to work on the paperwork, or show people your video, assuming that it's not supposed to be kept top secret and you can trust them, but show them the video and say, okay, based on that video, what's one thing that you'd want to ask me? 1, 2, or 3 things that you'd want to ask me. And again, notice the patterns. If the same question is coming up with a majority of people, make sure that's something that you really, really want to talk about and something that positions you well as the title holder. I'm going to leave it there for this week. Any questions, let me know. Send me a message, send me an email, or put it in the comments and I'll get back to you. Speak to you next week.